So what was it then that kind of gave you the motivation or that moment of clarity where you said, okay, like this is enough and I want to get help? And what did you actually do to start the recovery process?
Yeah, so like the summer of 2018, like I like was looking into rehab options and stuff like that, and obviously my financial situation wasn't an option. Um, but I had the seed kind of planted in my head, like I need help, but I was too scared to get help, so to speak. You know what I mean? But I had uh, two people that I would say, well, one specific person, he's like a foster. He was one of my foster brothers, and he was really bad into alcohol, and also suffered with like homelessness and stuff like that. And I remember at my foster brother's wedding, um, he was like not drinking, and I was trying to get him to drink. Like I was like, "Yo, like I'll call my guy, and like we can party." You know what I mean? And he's like, "I don't do that anymore." And I'm like, "What the fuck?" You know? And I looked at him all weird, and he told me about the 12-step program and how it changed his life. And I just looked at him like, whatever, dude, you know. But I knew that was out there, and I also like really wanted to try the school thing again because I knew I was like at one point during my addiction, I didn't talk about this, but I was a janitor. Um, so I was scrubbing shit out of toilets. You know, that was like the far as my qualities were taking me at that point. So I knew I was better than that. So I always knew like I needed to. I'm too smart for this, you know. And but I knew I can't do school again while using, you know. So a lot of those motivations were kind of in my head and floating around. And was that it was a Wednesday that September, and I was picking like empties out of recycling bins and bringing them to the beer store to just get enough to, you know, have a few beers. And yeah, I just felt like I was a bum. I was a bum. I shouldn't sugarcoat it. And that's when I just kind of, I don't know, man. I just like kind of got on my knees, so to speak, and just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm really gonna um, kill myself one of these days. Like, I'm gonna build up that courage. I'm gonna do it now. And so I ended up calling the number for the 12-step meetings, and asking when the meeting was and stuff. And so I went to that meeting, and I don't want to go too into what happened in that meeting, but I had a surreal spiritual experience where people call it odd or God. I know it was God that night. I met my now sponsor who has literally the exact same story as me. And like he didn't want to go to that meeting. I remember he was telling me, but something was kind of telling him to go. And I kind of trauma dumped in the meeting, and he just like resonated and identified with had the same story. You know what I mean? So yeah, he gave me his number, and I started kind of going through the steps and taking direction. And you know, now I had somebody who believed in me, a mentor who had been there, kind of thing. So and I applied to Georgian College, and I got waitlisted, and so now things are looking good.
Nice, that's amazing. I heard a couple of things there that I think are important for people who are listening and who are also going through addiction right now. And that is, you got to a really dark place, and then you met somebody who you knew who had also struggled with addiction, and he kind of was able to point you to the 12-step program, and he was clean and sober at that point. So maybe that gave you a little bit of hope that it was possible.
Absolutely. Like, you know, that moment was like, at the time I didn't know, but the seed was planted. Like, if he can do it, I can do it kind of thing. So, when I got to that point where I just, you know, wanted to sincerely change. And there's a difference where I think a lot of people go into recovery programs, or I'd been to like I'll just say like there's a lot of people I know from working in this field and stuff. They go into recovery for other people. My experience was not that. I didn't have a girlfriend trying to get me sober. mom trying to get me sober, family trying to get me sober. I was doing it truly, authentically for myself because I was going to end my life. I'm like that day probably, to be honest. And so the motivation was internal, like it wasn't like external, like for to please other people or to show like anyone that I was doing it for me.